So before I get started, here is the news. It's been snowing up in the hills nearby, it's cold, it's nasty, and we've also been put into lockdown. There's a curfew between 8 PM and 5 AM here. We can only go out of the house once a day to go shopping for an hour and 1 hour for exercise. And apart from that, everything's pretty much okay, except that I kind of messed up trimming my beard and my mustache yesterday. So I watched a movie. And that movie is a spectacularly good and very prophetic film from 1957 called A Face in the Crowd. It stars Andy Griffith, Patricia, Neal and Walter Matthau, and it's about television. Now, in the 1950s, television was seen as the enemy of film. People weren't going to the cinema as much anymore when they could sit at home and watch the glass teat, but there were some people who had a more nuanced view about television at the time, and two of them were, well, one of them was a problematic director, Elia Kazan, who was hated by many people for naming names during the anti-communist purge of the House Un-American Activities Committee a few years before. And the other was a screenwriter called Bud Schulberg, who'd written short stories, one of which was going to be adapted to this movie. And they, between them, had a kind of interesting view on television and the influence of it in particularly the politics of the United States of America. And so, based on Schulberg's short story, they created A Face in the Crowd. Here is the Criterion edition of the movie. It's got all of the great little extras that you expect from a Criterion edition, and it's not too expensive at the moment. But I did have something before I had the Criterion edition of this movie, and that's this. Now I'm going to see if I can get it into the frame. I also have the movie poster as a debut movie poster for A Face in the Crowd, framed. So it's a movie I really like, and I saw it first on television many moons ago. And I've got a kind of weird psychological thing with this film, as I have had with a number of films of which I've spoken on the channel. This one, it kind of goes deep for me. Now, not as deep as Suspiria, where I couldn't watch it for many years, but this one has an interesting backstory for me. Now, the backstory is simple. Andy Griffith, who plays the protagonist or antagonist or anti-hero in the movie Lonesome, Rhodes, bore a bit of a resemblance to my father. And I had a bad relationship with my father. He was not the nicest person in the world, and he shared many of the traits of Larry Lonesome Rhodes. This was Andy Griffith's first movie. He's playing a kind of wandering tramp, really, in Arkansas in the 1950s, who gets spoken to by Patricia, Neal's character Marcia, who's doing a kind of slice of life little series for her uncle's radio station.
What do I get out of this?
What happens is that they find out that Larry Lonesome Rhodes is a natural talent. He's a natural storyteller, he sings songs, and he's seductively charming, particularly to women.
Marcia, I put my whole self into everything I do.
And he knows how to manipulate people.
You cold fish, respectable girls. Inside you crave the same thing as the rest of them.
So as Larry and Marcia move through the next few years of their lives, his power and his influence and his media presence increases. First he gets a local television show in Memphis, and then with the assistance of an office boy played by Anthony Franciosa in his first movie, they go to New York and get a national stage for Lonesome Rhodes. And that's when things really get interesting. How this movie views the influence of television on politics. Now, this was only just starting at the time. There were the issues with Richard Nixon and his dog. There were some questions about whether Eisenhower was good on television or not. He wasn't. And so politics was beginning to be about how you presented on the small screen, which is not that small anymore, but how you presented on the small screen and how you came across to people. It was the start of populism in politics on a large scale through the medium of television. And this movie talks about that. Now, Lonesome Rhodes is not a man given to monogamy, let's just say. He does have a number of affairs, and he starts a relationship with Marcia, which is an unfortunate one for her. She loves him and she loathes him at the same time. Because he is such a charismatic person and such a manipulative, in a subtle way, human being, she can't let go of him. And the story is, as much as his ascendancy to the fringes of political power in the United States, and as Senator Fuller, who is running for the presidency, whom Larry assists using his media knowledge.
That's my house guest, Senator Fuller. That's the sort of man I like to see in the White House.
Don't they call him the last of the isolationists?
Oh, maybe in some of those left-wing New York papers.
It's also about Marcia and how she learns to break free from a toxic relationship with a narcissistic man who may or may not have bipolar disorder, definitely at times has imposter syndrome, and is a genuine threat to the democracy of the United States.
But my study of history has convinced me that in every strong and healthy society, from the Egyptians on, the mass had to be guided with a strong hand by a responsible elite.
It's a complex and interesting movie, and it's interesting because it came out before lots and lots of populism occurred at the top end of American politics. It happened with Ronald Reagan, where a movie star became American president. It happened with Bill Clinton, where a southern folksy kind of guy became president. And it's happened most recently with the incumbent president of the United States. That populism above competence is one of the concerns that the movie raises, and also the idea that a demagogue can be lifted to high levels of prominence and political power in the land while not having the necessary compassion and humanity and even skills to be able to do the job. This movie is 60 years ahead of its time. Andy Griffith is fantastic in his first film role. He had acted on stage. He did a play called No Time for Sergeants, which was very popular in New York for a year. He also travelled around doing plays in the southern states in his younger years with his wife Barbara, but this was his first film role and it wore him out. He said that he filmed for 3 months and it took him another 4 months to recover from Larry Lonesome Rhodes, because he became the character. Now, that was something that Elia Kazan, the director, was into. He was a method director. He wanted people to actually feel the emotions, because he knew that if the actors felt the emotions, it would show through on the screen. And indeed it does, which is kind of interesting because a lot of people like Andy Griffith for his later roles, playing Sheriff Andy Taylor in the Andy Griffith Show, Matlock and other things he did. But his career was at its peak, at its start, with this complex, monstrous human being, which transcends anything that he did subsequent to this, because he didn't want to dive that deeply. He didn't want to be affected by a role as much as he was by Lonesome Rhodes. He didn't want that kind of metamorphosis in himself to happen again. And he went on to have great success, and all credit to him for that, though there are some stories around that he was a little more closer to the character he plays in this movie than a lot of people thought. But having said that, he is fantastic. Patricia Neal is great as Marcia, a complex adult woman who is kind of addicted to a toxic man. And Patricia Neal's gravitas as an actor really shows through in this. There are some times when she doesn't have to say anything, but she has to react to things, and her skills there are next level stuff. She really is fantastic in this. And Walter Matthau as one of the writers of Lonesome Rhodes TV show, and in a sense he's the voice of reason to Marcia. He's really good. Walter Matthau was a jobbing actor in roles like this for a long time before he became successful in the 1960s and 1970s. And here he is the man who can see through the bullshit. And that's kind of a thankless role in some ways, but he does give it a charm and a complexity which serves the narrative really well. And I like him in this film. Like Andy Griffith, some of his earlier stuff, even though he had done things later which were really good, particularly things like The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, In A Face in the Crowd and other movies like Failsafe, Matthau was showing his chops as a good character actor.
Naturally, here you see the lepers of the great television industry, men without faces, Why, they even slide our paychecks under the door so they can pretend we're not here.
The movie is really good at showing us the dangers of populism and the dangers and the power of television as a medium for political awareness.
That in TV we have the greatest instrument for mass persuasion in the history of the world.
And one of the things that we find in this film, which is really kind of interesting, is right at the start of his career, Lonesome Rhodes suggests that the local sheriff who's running for town mayor is only fit to be the dog catcher in town. So he gets everybody who listens to the radio show to take their dogs to the sheriff's house. And that's probably the first time that really, for me, I realised that there's a continuum there from that kind of talking on the radio and then getting people to act, and the power of social media movements as we have them now. And one of the things about this too is that Larry Lonesome Rhodes also says he's an influencer. And this is the first time that the term influencer came into the popular realm. It had been used a lot in advertising agencies and things like that, but it was never put into the public realm before a face in the crowd. This is a powerful piece of cinema. It's really rewatchable. There's a reason why it has a Criterion edition. And if you want it, I'll post a link to it in the show notes. It really is a wonderful deconstruction of the power of media. If you were going to put it into a double feature of 1950s movies that belong similar themes, you'd put it in a double feature with Billy Wilder's Ace in the Hole, otherwise known as The Big Carnival, which came out in about 52 with Kirk Douglas, because they're both about the public being manipulated by greedy and ruthless human beings through the medium of the media.
If you don't come, I'll dive off this balcony into the park and I'm 10 blocks from the lake.
You really should see this movie if you haven't. And if you have seen it, it's worth watching again in the current context of not just American politics, but politics in whichever country you're in, and politics in local politics as well, state politics, regional politics, provincial politics, whatever it is where you live. You can look at this movie through the lens of your local political system and see the way that it predicted a lot of the things that you're seeing in your local news. So thank you very much for watching. I loved doing this movie. I loved watching this movie again, and I really like the fact that I've got a decent edition of it, as well as the poster I've got here. It is one of the best films of the 1950s for me. Now, before I do the like and subscribe thing, there have been people that didn't like some of the things I've said politically on the channel before, and I'd just like to address that for one moment. I'm going to talk about what I feel. Whether you like what I say about the American president or not does not matter one bit to me. I will speak honestly about things, and I will not censor myself on this channel. And if my beliefs about politics are different than yours, fair enough. I'm not going to go on your channel and I'm not going to complain about your right-wing politics. I'm going to stay true to what I believe, and I'm going to talk about it through the medium of showing how things relate from movies to politics. I'm not going to do it all the time. I'm going to do it occasionally. And you can put up comments being disrespectful to me on my YouTube channel if you choose to. I'll just delete them and report you. But having said that, please like and subscribe if you do enjoy it. And I'll catch you guys next time. I'm doing another 24-hour, maybe this week, maybe next week. And so I'm diving down that rabbit hole. We're in lockdown at the moment. There's not a lot else to do, so I might as well do something fun like that. So in the meantime, watch good movies, watch bad movies, look after yourselves, please. Wear a mask, social distance, whatever you need to do to stay away from this bloody virus. And I'll catch you guys next time.